Hi, I'm Bob Laliberte, a Senior Analyst for the Enterprise Strategy Group, and I'm joined here by my colleague Nick Rouda, another Senior Analyst for ESG covering Big Data. And we're here to have another in a series of Big Data and networking discussions. Nick, there's a lot of talk of Big Data, right? There's a lot of interest in it, there's a lot of adoption in it. There's also a lot of talk about cloud and some of the networking implications to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of macro trends going on in IT today. Big data is clearly one, cloud's another, social and mobile, Internet of Things are all coming out. And there's some nice convergent points between these, but definitely we saw big data and cloud as one of the highest areas of overlap. Customers who are looking at one are also looking at the other. We see today about 32% of organizations say they're looking to do big data in an infrastructure as a service environment. Similarly, within 5 years, we see 44% indicate that people want to use software as a service as the primary mechanism for their business intelligence, analytics, big data type solutions. This trend suggests that you want to move the analytics close to where the data is. And as people are increasingly looking outwards and cloud-based solutions for interacting with customers, getting other lines of the business going and different types of IT in the cloud, then big data naturally moves along with that. And I say big data broadly. If you get more specific, you can look at databases. And ESG research found 27% of people looking to do new database initiatives, primarily having that be a cloud-oriented type solution.
Okay, so that's really interesting because even that concept, the word big data, has certain implications for the network. If you're talking about moving it all to an infrastructure as a service or software as a service, you've got to get all that data to that site.
Yep.
So this is, again, another area where the networking team's really going to have to be aware of what those initiatives are and be able to understand what locations are going to be responsible for transferring that data up to that cloud location. So for the WAN in particular, they're really going to have to examine what type of bandwidth requirements they have going to those sites.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people think of the cloud as this ubiquitous, all-present thing, but it's actually just another data center. Somebody else's data somewhere else. So again, the volumes of big data complicate this, but also the sources. People are collecting data in different locations. They're moving data around different locations. That has serious implications for wide area networks. And I don't know, I mean, do you see your customers actively considering this, engaging, looking, trying to measure and predict what the impact will be for their organization?
I think what we're seeing from the networking side, obviously the networking team's always looking and reevaluating. The interesting things that we're starting to see now are how organizations are connecting to the cloud and what types of services and whether they're private line, whether they're going to be just internet based and how big. Again, depending on the importance, there's going to be implications, I think, along redundant paths. Mm-hmm. So if these data analytics, the big data analytics that they're running in the cloud are going to be critical to their business and they need to have access to them and availability to them, there's going to be implications around ensuring that they always have access. And I think also there's that concept of, you know, if they're leveraging certain cloud sites based on geographies, is that eventually is there some type of a roll-up of all that data and how is that accomplished and handled? So I think there's a lot of, and that might be working with the cloud provider to find out what type of connectivity they have between their data centers and internally. So there's a lot of different implications, I think, behind this for the networking side. And I think not all of it has been fully thought out yet, right? And understood, because we're still somewhat early in getting all of this data up to the cloud, analyzing it, and maybe potentially having to retrieve it and store it. So.
Yeah, and we see some interesting variances in our research. If you look at different lines of industry, financial services isn't showing the same shift towards cloud as other areas. And you might argue, well, they're heavily regulated. I would actually say that's not the main concern. Healthcare is also heavily regulated, but they're twice as likely to be looking at cloud solutions for big data and analytics. Maybe it's because the consumers that is healthcare, you know, the patients are largely external. You're monitoring their medical devices at home. They're accessing your website for healthcare and insurance information. But there's some really big difference in preferences. Retail's gone heavily into both cloud and big data. One other correlation we saw that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about has been age, and it's age of company and age of IT staff even, having big preference differences. If you look at cloud, for example, they'll pick out Amazon as one of their primary, most strategic providers of technology. And that's a little mind-blowing if you think 10 years ago, you'd expect IBM, Microsoft, SAP maybe to be their main people. Amazon showing so high on the list for the younger employees, younger companies really suggests that transition's happening. And I expect that to bear out a lot of new pressure on the networks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really going to force organizations to take a hard look at how they're connecting and what type of performance. I know the survey we had done, I think it was last year on cloud, we had asked organizations that had already gone to the cloud and were using services in the cloud about what their challenges were versus those that were planning to go to the cloud. And interestingly enough, there was a 2-to-1 difference in those organizations that had already gone to the cloud, citing that network performance as a problem versus those that were planning to go. So it really brings up that you don't know what you don't know until you're doing it. And in that case, right, organizations really found that that network piece was critical, and it could be a limiting factor in your success in a cloud operation, and certainly for doing these big data. So clearly there's going to be a lot of implications for this, for networking teams when they're trying to enable these big data initiatives in the cloud, and really have to understand about these performance issues before they go into and create these initiatives, right? And then have poor user satisfaction and poor user experience. So it's really going to be critical to understand what the requirements are, how much bandwidth, what type of performance is going to be required before they go and set these initiatives up. Mm-hmm. Well, Nick, thank you very much. I think this is going to wrap up another session, and we look forward to seeing you again shortly.